Strap in, everyone. This sweet and innocent little piece of edutainment just turned to the dark side. Okay, so today for ADG Pro, we're going back to Word Rescue, one of the better pieces of edutainment to come out in the days of DOS. And not a masterpiece by any stretch, just better than what was typical for the time. The thing is, though, that because this is a game designed to be played by younger audiences, it made me curious that maybe, just maybe, figuring out the minimum winning score wouldn't be so hard. Turns out, that was a mistake. Trying to go for a minimum winning score in all 3 episodes of Word Rescue was more a test of frustration and patience than anything else. Though the crazy thing is, I learned way more about this game in the process. Like movement tricks I never knew about, bugs I never knew existed, even how the RNG works for determining the word and image pairings on every level. Now, before we get started tackling the task of beating these 3 episodes with as few points as possible, we need to do some preliminary stuff. Well, specifically, we need to know what awards points and what doesn't, so we can ensure we avoid points wherever possible. Well, unfortunately for us, pretty much everything scores points. All pickups are worth 5 points as a base, completing a word-image pair is worth 20 points, calling down Benny Bookworm to slime an enemy Gruzzle is worth 10 points, and the final letter in a letter sequence is worth 100 points instead of 5 if you collect them in order. Touching a question mark box to turn it into a word is not worth points, nor is making an incorrect match, as doing this will instead spawn a Gruzzle, plus reaching the exit door is also not worth any points. So, knowing these numbers, in a best case scenario, we should be able to exit a level having scored only 140 points, 20 points for each of the 7 pairs we need to make, while avoiding every pickup and Gruzzle around without resorting to sliming any Gruzzles. But there's a few wrinkles to this plan. First, let's talk about the secret bonuses. There are 3 secret bonuses you can acquire in every level, each of which is worth 500 points. Secret bonus number 1 is awarded for collecting all of the books in a level. Now, since we're going to be avoiding books like The Plague, this isn't going to be a concern. Secret bonus number 3 is awarded for clearing all 7 word image pairings without making any mistakes. Well, this means, in order to prevent that bonus from being awarded, we have to intentionally make at least 1 mistake over the course of a level, remembering that doing this will spawn a Gruzzle, so we need to be very selective of when and where to do this so that the Gruzzle which spawns in doesn't get in our way. As for secret bonus number 2, I'm going to hold off talking about that one for a moment to instead talk about the next wrinkle in this plan, the difficulty selection. The Word Rescue presents 3 difficulty levels to choose from, easy, medium, and hard. Now, way back when I reviewed this game on ADG, I mentioned that there was a massive spike in difficulty going from medium to hard because of a number of factors, one of which being that you could end up with tons more Gruzzles to deal with. And since we need to avoid as many points as possible, and sliming Gruzzles is worth points, we absolutely do not want to play on hard mode. But what about the choice between easy and medium? Well, this is where things get interesting. On easy, you only ever have to deal with 1 Gruzzle, and it's always in the same spot, as the Gruzzles are placed into each level in a particular order internally. Whereas on medium, you're guaranteed to deal with the first 2 Gruzzles placed in a level, and a coin flip is made anytime a level resets to determine if the 3rd Gruzzle will appear or not. Plus, we have secret bonus number 2 to consider, as this bonus is awarded for reaching the exit door with the key, having never slimed any Gruzzles over the course of the level. Now, all of this combined makes it seem like playing on easy would be the best choice, since to avoid secret bonus number 2, we have to slime at least 1 Gruzzle, which would be worth 10 points, but it's better than the 500 points we'd get from the secret bonus. But there's one last little catch here. Secret bonus number 2 is never awarded. Don't get me wrong, you'll see the secret bonus appear on screen, but if you pay attention to your score, no points are actually added to it. This bug was never fixed, and so it means if we can avoid sliming any Gruzzles at all, we can beat the game with even less points than would normally be possible if this secret bonus was working as intended. But what this also means is that it's actually better to play on medium. Yes, you have more Gruzzles to deal with and they move a little faster, but they also move more predictably. On easy, the sole Gruzzle in a level may not move fast, but its movements are very random, and thus it can be hard to predict where it's going to move, but more importantly, it'll be nearly impossible to goad it out of the way. Whether electing to play on medium was a mistake or not, I don't really know. I mean, it clearly made some levels much harder, but at the very least made the Gruzzles more predictable and easier to deal with in certain situations. So, let's get this show started. Though we have 15 levels to go through in episode 1, and 20 levels each to go through in episodes 2 and 3, for a total of 55 levels. Now, showing all of that gameplay and describing every little nuance would take an eternity. So instead, I'm going to focus more so on the problem areas I ran into, and scoring situations over the base minimum of 140 points, which are unavoidable. Plus, for each episode, I'm going to give you all a preview of the scores I attained and the difficulties I ran into with a simple chart. Now on this chart, each level will be color-coded based on how long it took me to figure out and execute the lowest attainable score, with that approximate time being translated into a difficulty rating, from as low as very easy, where it only took me 1 to 5 minutes, up to easy for 6 to 10 minutes, then medium for 11 to 15 minutes, hard for 16 to 20 minutes, very hard for 21 to 40 minutes, and finally, extremely hard for 41 minutes up to a full hour. And with these ratings in mind, here are my results for episode 1. Yeah, the very first level of the entire experience is also one of the hardest to optimize for a minimum winning score. Go figure. I also ran into considerable challenges on levels 3 and 8 as well, with most of the episode actually having a fair degree of difficulty for pulling this off. I was only able to execute a first or second try success on a single level, level 14, out of the entire first set. And something else I need to point out too is that this game auto-saves your progress and score anytime you quit the program or load a profile. Since you keep your score between failures, this means the maximum score possible is as high as you care to take it, limited only by the variables in play, but this also means we can't simply reload our profile to reset our score following a failed attempt, because the moment we try to reload our profile, it saves our profile. What I had to do to be able to continually make multiple attempts in a row was to keep a hex editor open in the background with my profile loaded into it. Now if I needed to reload my save, what I would do is load a different profile in the game, go into the hex editor and resave my active profile without having changed anything, then reload that profile in the game. If I succeeded, I would immediately go back to the main menu and reload the profile in order to save its state to disk, then would go into my hex editor and reload the profile in there so that it would now be updated and ready to save back to disk in case of a failure. Basically, if you're going to attempt to go for a minimum winning score, you absolutely need some method in place to reset your profile back to how it was following a level transition. Either that, or not only make zero mistakes, but have RNG work in your favor every step of the way. Anyways, we start on level 1-1, and the extremely tricky thing here is a particular question mark box with a book underneath and the third letter for the letter sequence up above. Now since this box is not in a dead end and has more boxes off to the left, we absolutely need a means to circumvent it. Now at first, I was just trying jumps and frequently missing, but eventually I realized that in order to get through situations like this, it's good to find spots you can do full jumps from, which work every time. Now since the game only runs at about 12 frames a second by default, it is very easy to pull off perfect full-strength diagonal jumps, thus finding spots where you can do this is essential. Now had I known to try this earlier, I probably would have had an easier time with this first level, and thus maybe it shouldn't have an extremely hard ranking, but whatever, it is what it is. Also, there's a pit way to the right which you can goad the Gruzzles into to get them out of the way without having to slime them. Level 1-2 is pretty easy, only took me a few tries to get right, and doesn't have any scoring items, can't easily get around, so yeah, we won't be going into details over that one. Level 1-3, however, ramps things up, because there are scoring items all over the place, and figuring out how to clear the level while getting as few of those items as possible was incredibly tricky. Initially, you must grab 2 books to get out of the starting area, and then to transition between both sides of the starting area while still being able to grab all question mark boxes, you are forced to pick up the first letter in the word sequence, above which are 2 of the question mark boxes, which require extremely precise jumps to get to without collecting even more books. This would be a good time to point out that the way collision detection works in terms of picking up objects is that you can walk under items which are right above your head without collecting them, but if you try to walk across a floor where there's an item directly under your feet, you will pick up that item. Now, it's also important to note that your player size is exactly 1.5 tiles wide, and this absolutely comes into play when trying to climb things, as the side you climb up or down on will make a difference. There's other nuances too, but I'll point them out as they become pertinent. Anyways, level 1-3 is all precision, as there's tons of pits for the Gruzzles to fall into, so even though it's very hard, it's at least all down to your own raw skill, plus there's an additional 4 more books you must collect to get to the exit door. Overall, you clear the level having collected 175 points instead of 140. Now, level 1-4 starts you face to face with a Gruzzle on approach and hardly any room to avoid it, and in order to reach one of the question mark boxes requires climbing a ladder with books on it, at least 2 of which you must grab, with it being possible to avoid the other 2. You're going to spend a large chunk of the level dodging that first Gruzzle over and over again, which, because they may jump at random when you try to jump, means you can just die on a whim with little recourse. However, the rest of the level is straightforward, so you just need some luck dealing with that Gruzzle, and you'll ultimately clear the level with 150 points. Level 1-5 isn't too bad, but does require some Gruzzle manipulation. Level 1-6 is tricky only because of the Gruzzles in the starting area, which takes some effort and luck to dodge, with the rest of the level being straightforward. And level 1-7 is also tricky in terms of dealing with the Gruzzles, but it's fairly compact, and you can completely avoid going to the lowest sections of it, thus making it go pretty fast. But then we get to level 1-8, the hardest level to get a minimum score on in the entire first episode. Now, firstly, the level immediately sticks a Gruzzle on you, and you are going to be dodging this Gruzzle multiple times over the course of it. Now, secondly, to get to the question mark boxes in the lower section forces you to pick up a slime bucket. Then, in order to get to the upper section, requires picking up 2 books on a ladder. Even worse, one of the question mark boxes is only accessible from picking up 4 books in a narrow corridor, while also dealing with a Gruzzle, which cannot be dodged, normally. One of the tricks with the AI for the Gruzzles is that if your height is even just slightly higher than that of the Gruzzle, there's a random chance with every move they make that they'll initiate a jump. And in order to get into the corridor that's blocked off by the Gruzzle, you need to first goad that Gruzzle out of the corridor, then wait for it to jump after you so you can lead it up towards the exit door. But there might also be a 3rd Gruzzle up there, so you need to check first if that 3rd Gruzzle is there, and if so, goad it all the way to the exit door temporarily so that it's out of the way, then get that other Gruzzle into the same area above so that you can go about collecting all the question mark boxes. Then, when it's time to get to the exit door, goad that 2nd Gruzzle back down to the section it was originally in, then go fetch the 3rd Gruzzle, goad it back towards that same area so you can jump over it, then head for the exit door. This level is a freaking ordeal, with the only saving grace being that you don't need extreme precision with your jumps, and you ultimately exit the level having collected 175 points. 1-9 is fairly easy, just time consuming because it's huge with everything scattered all over. But 1-10 feels like it's going to be oppressive at first, but it's actually not that bad, because it's not that big and the Gruzzles are only a problem in one little area. Though this was the level that made me realize I'd made a mistake in regards to how the AI works back when I first reviewed this game. The Gruzzles can indeed fall through non-solid floors. They just don't like doing it, plus will only make the attempt if their standing height is higher than the shoulders of the player character. At shoulder height or below, they will not fall through any floors at all. 111 is the first of many Pueblo-themed maps, and unfortunately for our score, this one puts a lot of books and other items in the path of places we need to go back and forth from. The least amount of pickups I was able to discern was 9, which includes 2 books from the starting room, 1 on either end, 3 books on a rooftop, which can be avoided when jumping off the roof, but not the other way around, 1 book from the roof edge that gets you back up to that roof, and 2 books and a slime bucket to get back onto a different set of rooftops, which you can't get back to otherwise. This level's not that bad, really. It was just tricky figuring out how to do it while picking up the least amount of items, resulting in 185 points. 112 is pretty easy since most of the bonus items are down in the lower section where we don't have to go, but we are forced to pick up a slime bucket to transition between 2 parts of the level, giving us 145 points instead of 140. Level 113 was pretty hard because the Gruzzles are very difficult to avoid, and you're going all over the place as well, weaving around the many item pickups strewn about. Plus you're forced to grab a book right from the start and a slime bucket at the end. Enemy management is a big thing to ensure you don't cut yourself off from progress, but do it right and you end the level with 150 points. 114 is the only level in the first episode I would classify as very easy to get a minimum score on, so you don't need me to explain it. The final level, 115, has some tricks to it and is mostly a test of patience rather than skill, whereby the first colored vat actually has no solidity to its top, thus you fall straight into it. Now, you as the player have no reason to do so, but goading the Gruzzles into this vat gets them out of the way so you can complete the level with impunity. The trick though is that you will be picking up 6 additional books to do so, 5 from going down one of the vats which has a question mark box in it, and believe it or not, the 6th pickup is placed inside the exit door, meaning you are forced to pick it up when you exit the level even though you can't tell it's even there. Either way, you should end this level with 170 points, and your final score for the entirety of Episode 1 should be 2,270 points. Which, to help put things into perspective, you can end the first level on medium skill without making any mistakes with 1,425 points, and provided the RNG works in your favor and gives you a 7-letter word to spell and 3 Gruzzles to slime instead of 2. It also took me 4 hours and 16 minutes of raw gameplay to achieve this. Now let's move on to Episode 2, which has 20 levels, but first let's reveal just how difficult this process ended up being. Or rather, how not difficult it ended up being. I mean, yeah, there were 2 exceedingly hard levels, and the 3rd and the 19th, but levels 5, 6, 12, 14, 16, even the final level were all incredibly easy to clear, and all with the absolute minimum of 140 points, some of which I cleared on my very first attempt. So I'm going to be skipping those and instead focusing on the rest. The first level of Episode 2 is actually pretty small, but presented a number of challenges in trying to figure out how few points were possible, since to get into the lower section requires grabbing a sizable number of books. Plus there's another problem. A Gruzzle which we have to get around, but which is 100% impossible to dodge. This level has one of only 2 instances in this entire minimum winning score challenge where we must slime a Gruzzle to succeed, which scores us 10 points. And then we end up collecting 11 books and 1 slime bucket in total to be able to reach all the question mark boxes and the exit door, resulting in us clearing the level with 210 points. Now when I got to the second level of Episode 2 is when I remembered that this game has music issues in the second and third episodes. Well, I went through most of Episode 2 without any music, so you won't be hearing any for the next while. But following that, when the problem occurred again with Episode 3, I decided to look into what was going on. Turns out, one of the music files for Episode 2 specifically is corrupted. So to get the music working, you need to replace the corrupted file with one of the non-corrupted files, which also fixes the music for Episode 3. However, for some mysterious reason, the music will still cut out when it wraps around to where the corrupted file once was, and will only load the music right the first time the game tries. Yeah, it's pretty weird like that, and pretty weird that the problem carries over into Episode 3 as well. Once a corrupted music file plays, no more music will play at all until you restart the game. Anyways, level 2-2 is pretty easy, but only if the third Gruzzle doesn't show up. Then it becomes a nightmare. Check if the third Gruzzle is present or not first before doing anything, and if it is, die to it to reset the level without having to manually reset your save state. Then check again. Once the third Gruzzle is not present, you're pretty much set. Just be aware there's 1 book in the way which you're forced to pick up, resulting in a score of 145 points for the level. Now we come to the first really hard level of the second episode, 2-3. The thing is, dealing with the Gruzzles and pairing up the words and images isn't all that bad here. The trick is that everything is scattered pretty far from each other, and because you do a ton of vertical movement, it's easy to forget where you can and can't safely drop. Plus, once you have the key to the door, you're going to suddenly realize you went through the entire level and never saw the exit door. The door is hidden way up high, closer to the right side than the left, and since there's tons of books up high, it suddenly becomes a precision jumping challenge in order to collect as few books as possible while going for the exit, with one mistake meaning having to do the entire level over again. After a lot of effort, I found that if you approach the exit door from the right side, you only have to pick up 4 books and the first letter of the letter sequence. With it almost seeming like a perfect jump would avoid one of those 4 books, but there's some oddities with how movement is processed, and while a perfect jump would dodge the book, you'd hit the platform the door is on at its corner, meaning it won't count and you'll just fall down. This is something that's going to come up again later, and I'll describe in more detail what's going wrong here when it's easier to demonstrate. When all is said and done though, you should end up with a score of 165 points for this level. A level 2-4 is not all that bad really, but there's quite a bit of luck involved with dodging the Gruzzles so many times, and that's what ultimately raises the difficulty here. Now 2-5 and 2-6 are both very easy, and 2-7's pretty easy, but once again they put a book right in the way of the exit door, so you end up with 145 points instead of 140. A 2-8 is similar, pretty easy but with 2 long vertical columns of books you need to get through, one of which stops short of the floor by 1 book, meaning if you go through at that point, you only end up picking up 1 book instead of 2, again resulting in a level total of 145 points. 2-9 again has some nuance to it in terms of keeping the Gruzzles out of the way, and while there's 2 different routes to the exit door at the end, both involve picking up 2 books, so you end the level with 150 points. 2-10 is a bit tricky because the books are scattered in all kinds of places where we need to go, so it took a bit of trial and error to determine how few you really need to pick up to win the level. Turns out, only 4. 2 on either side of the top of the tower so that we can get to both sides of its roof. 2-11 is very straightforward once you know the layout. It just takes a few minutes to get the layout well mapped out in your mind to be able to solve it appropriately. 2-12 is dead simple, but then we have 2-13. And what makes 2-13 hard is the precision required to avoid picking up any extra books we don't want, especially at the end when going for the exit door. But if you do it right, you can clear 2-13 with the bare minimum of 140 points. Next comes 2-14, which again is super easy. Then comes 2-15, and now it's finally time to talk about RNG. Up to this point, how the RNG works hasn't been a huge concern, but 2-15 is the first level where it's actually really important, because in order to escape the starting area, we need the word directly above us at the start to match the picture to the left. Now, we can get out of the starting area for sure, no matter what, but if that word-image pairing doesn't occur as described, it'll be impossible to match the word above the level entrance with its correct image without picking up additional scoring items, because in order to dodge scoring items, we would have to touch other images after revealing the word, which would cancel out the word and spawn a Gruzzle. Fortunately, well, for the moment, the way RNG works for the words and images is incredibly straightforward. Each level has 7 question mark boxes, and internally they are numbered 1 through 7. That internal ordering does not change. You also get a word list you can access when you begin the level. That word list is also ordered, and that order as well does not change. All that changes is which box will be the first to accept words in order from the first to last word, wrapping back to the first box in sequence after the last one, and which different box will be the first to accept images in order from the first to last image. Now, there's no way to know without hacking the level data which box is the first in sequence and which is the last, but because there's no actual shuffling, simply choosing 2 different boxes to start the sequence on for the words and the images, once you know the order either the words are in or the images are in, as placed within a level, you can immediately determine where every word and image is simply by seeing one of each. This also means that there's effectively only 6 possible collection patterns with every level. But, so long as you only need guaranteed placement on 1 word and image pair, you have a 1 in 6 chance of that being the case every time the level resets. And here in 2.15, that's all we need, is 1 word to line up to 1 image. And since it's right at the start, it's easy to just spawn a Gruzzle, die, and reset the level if we don't get what we need. From there though, 2.15 still isn't an easy level and requires a combination of Gruzzle dodging and precision platforming. And now's also a good time to mention that Gruzzles which are off-screen don't move, excepting Gruzzles which are directly above that top boundary of the screen. But still, this means using the screen boundary itself to stop Gruzzles in their tracks is a good tactic to minimize their movements and lock them into certain sections of the levels. Ultimately, we can clear 215, having collected only one extra book. However, in my original attempt at this, I took a different path up to the top right corner of the map, which saw me collect a different book, but also a slime bucket. I've since double-checked and confirmed that collecting a different book avoids having to do that, and thus the minimum score for this level should be 145 points, even though my score for this level when I was attempting it was 150 points. Oh well. Level 216 is super easy, no need to go into it. Then we have 217, and while dealing with the Gruzzles on 217 is relatively simple, there are books freaking everywhere. You need a lot of precision to avoid the books, and it's really important to find good spots to do full power jumps from to dodge things. In the end, I was able to clear the level with only 3 books collected, one right near the start at the top of a ladder you need to climb, and 2 over by the pit to the far right, resulting in 155 points. The level 218 was pretty easy, but it forces you to pick up a slime bucket, and at first glance, you would think it would force you to get only 2 books near the exit door. But remember earlier I said we were going to talk about jumping in corners? Yeah, so the way jumping works in this game, given that the player is 1.5 tiles wide, if you're only on a tile by half a tile, meaning you're off that tile by a full tile, the game will push you away half a tile and force you to fall down. To successfully land on the corner of a platform requires that you get on it by a full tile, which means your jump cannot be perfectly aligned with the corner. You have to be further over by half a tile, which means when attempting to jump up at the end of 218, if you only jump high enough to touch 2 of the 3 books, you will get pushed off the platform. To complete the jump up, you must jump higher, which in turn means touching the 3rd book. There's technically a way to get onto a platform without touching any more than 2 of the tiles above it, but it's a trick I'll be going into later and only works if you have at least 2 extra frames of jump height available, which in this circumstance you don't. So even if you know said trick, it won't help you here. Thus you leave 218 with 160 points. Next up is the hardest stage in all of episode 2, level 19. But the thing here is that there's nothing mysterious or ambiguous about this level. It's all down to execution. But what makes it so incredibly hard is that the execution requires performing precision jumps while dodging Gruzzles at the same time. Plus, a lot of the time I spent on this level was just figuring out how to get those jumps to work out as easily as possible. It takes a lot of practice to do this level right, but because you can clear it without collecting any unnecessary scoring items, you just gotta buckle in and do it. And then the final level, 220, is super easy. Ultimately, the minimum winning score for episode 2 is 2,980 points. Though my score was 2,985 because of the extra 5 points I didn't need to get from level 215. And my run of episode 2 in particular took 4 hours and 3 minutes, slightly faster than my episode 1 run, despite having 20 levels to clear instead of 15. Which kind of goes to show that episode 2 isn't all that hard overall, it just has a few sticking points. Then finally, we get to episode 3. Now, I'm going to reveal the difficulty rankings here, and you're going to notice a couple things. Yeah, we've got a few medium and hard levels, one very hard level, but no extremely hard levels. Instead, 3 of the levels are marked in gray, which isn't in the legend. Well, notice that the extremely hard entry reads 41 to 60 minutes. Yeah, gray represents any level which took me over an hour to clear with a minimum score, gaining the dubious difficulty ranking of total insanity. And you'll see why when we get to each of these 3 levels, why I called it that. Also, note the asterisk on the score for level 18, which we'll talk about when we get there because that's something that's truly evil. Not hard, just evil. In any case, the very first level of episode 3 is a totally insane level to attempt to get a minimum score on, because at first glance it seems like you're going to have to slime Gruzzles to win. The first Gruzzle you come across is incredibly difficult to dodge, the second Gruzzle is only possible to dodge once and then never again, and the third Gruzzle is literally impossible to dodge, but is also the optional one which sometimes appears and sometimes doesn't. However, Gruzzles can and will fall through non-solid floors if you give them enough time. So what we need to do is goad every Gruzzle in the level back to the start where we can ensure they won't get in our way. The problem with this tactic, though, is that it takes freaking forever for the second Gruzzle to come down that ladder, made worse by the fact that it won't come down all the way unless we get into the room below and jump repeatedly to scroll it back onto the screen temporarily multiple times until it finally comes all the way down. Now, I later figured out that Gruzzles check for horizontal movement first, and if they fail to move horizontally, they don't run the random check to pass through the floor. So when the Gruzzle is on this ladder, it will only try to drop anytime it doesn't run a horizontal movement check. Suffice to say, this takes a while. But thankfully, we have control over the game speed. So what I started doing was ramping the speed up by 6 clicks to get it to drop down, then ramping the speed back down 6 clicks to default once it was down far enough. But getting the Gruzzles down further to reach the entrance also had some nuance, as I had to goad them right at first to ensure that they didn't get stuck trying to go left, since to go left appropriately, they had to be right on the floor level. So yeah, it's not that level 3-1 is all that difficult, but you spend a ridiculous amount of time manipulating the Gruzzles to go where you want them to go, and then still have to dodge them afterwards to get back into the house to start matching words and images together. But with enough patience, you'll get it done, and will clear the level having collected only 9 extra items, a book right at the start that you can't dodge, and 8 books blocking the path between you and the exit door. Level 3-2 is really easy, but there's a lot of books you can't dodge. I found that, at minimum, you need to collect 15 books and 1 bucket of slime to be able to access all of the question mark boxes, with one of the question mark boxes in particular having a book directly underneath, meaning you need a frame-perfect sideways slide in and out of the box to avoid picking that book up, which is a quirk of the movement system which pretty much only comes up in this specific situation. You ultimately clear the level with 220 points. 3-3 can be a bit tricky in terms of dealing with the Gruzzles, but there's practically no scoring items to dodge, since they're all sequestered away in a part of the level you don't have to visit, so it still goes by pretty quick. 3-4 is more the same, tricky Gruzzles, but you don't have to get anywhere near the big masses of scoring items. 3-5 is a bit more straightforward, though there's 3 pairs of books you're not going to be able to avoid, and dealing with the first Gruzzle can be a bit rough, but once you've gotten by it once, it's far less of a threat because you can manipulate its position following. Thus you end 3-5 with 170 points. Now we have the only really hard level of episode 3, which isn't totally bonkers, level 6. But what made this level extra hard is not understanding the RNG. You see, if the RNG was actually shuffling words and images and not just cycling them, then it would be possible to get even less points in this level than I was ultimately forced to collect. But I didn't understand what was up with the RNG by this point, otherwise I would have been able to figure out sooner rather than later that it wasn't possible to roll a combination which would enable dodging certain scoring items. Once I started to realize something was up with the RNG, I bit the bullet and started adding scoring items into the mix, which I initially didn't want to get. Ultimately collecting 1 book up a staircase, another book on a table which was in the way, and a quartet of books in the lower hallway. This still didn't make the level easy, as there's some precision necessary and the Gruzzles do get in the way a little, but ultimately I cleared the level with 170 points. 3-7 has some nasty surprises and some precision jumps you need to pull off, but once you get those figured out, the rest of it is surprisingly straightforward, despite how scattered everything is, and you can clear the level without collecting any extra scoring items. 3-8 is incredibly straightforward, and 3-9 is less straightforward but still very easy. But then we come up to the next insane level, 3-10. And I was stuck on this one for a while because, again, I wasn't quite sure what was up with the RNG. And to avoid extra scoring items, I needed it to work out in a particular way, but it was through repeated attempts at this level, watching the patterns, where I began to realize what was going on, and that the pattern of words and images I needed was simply not possible. Actually, 3-10 was difficult for a myriad of reasons, so it's not immediately obvious where some of the non-solid walls and non-solid floors are. Thus, even after I abandoned trying to get the RNG to work in my favor, I was still coming up with new strategies as I learned what parts I could move through and which I couldn't. Firstly, the third Gruzzle in the level, the one which is a coin flip to show up, is placed right in front of the level's entrance. So if it happens to be there, you can just quickly die to it, reset the level, and keep doing that until the coin flip works in your favor and the Gruzzle's not there. Even then, we still have to rely on RNG a little because we can still avoid picking up some scoring items we don't need so long as the word from the question mark box at the left of the level entrance matches the image immediately to the right. If it does, and the third Gruzzle wasn't rolled into existence, we mean business. Next, there's a book at the guardhouse blocking access to the right side of the level. Now, it may look like you can jump onto the roof, but you just barely miss it. Then, we need to goad the Gruzzle out so that it's relatively out of the way. Now, we're able to climb up into the clouds and access the rest of the castle. Ultimately, we should be collecting 3 more scoring items. A book on a ladder heading towards the first question mark box we initially touched, but from its opposite side, which we need to make sure we only attempt to approach that when we have the word which matches the image for that box. A slime bucket up in the tower, which is next to a book, but we can dodge the book with some quick jumping. And when heading from the rear of the castle back to the front, we'll have to pick up 1 more book before we can jump up and dodge the rest by grabbing a ladder. This level is a freaking maze, with required RNG at the start to make it all work. But in the end, with a lot of effort and some luck, you can make it out having collected only 160 points. Level 311 is pretty easy, but you'll need to collect a slime bucket to make your first transit between the left and right sides of the level, and one of the question mark boxes on the left side cannot be reached without crossing a barrier made of staggered books, so you'll need to collect an extra book too, resulting in a score of 150. 312 is also pretty easy, but it's not immediately clear which scoring items you can dodge and still succeed. It turns out you only need to collect 2. The very first book directly to your right at the start of the level, and when making your way back left, a precise jump right here will ensure you only collect 1 book and none of the books above, nor the slime bucket below, again allowing you to clear the level with 150 points. 313 isn't so much hard as it is time consuming. Now, since we're trying to avoid scoring items, we have to constantly climb down the trees, then climb back up, dodging things along the way and being fairly precise with the ascents upwards, and there's Gruzzles to deal with, though thankfully they have a tendency to get caught up on the rooftops below. The level's a little tricky, but not outrageous, and you can clear it without collecting more than the base score of 140 points. 314 is a curious level because it's more based on luck than skill. You first have to get the 2 Gruzzles up top to fall into the hole, then you need to go down the ladder and see if the third Gruzzle was coin flipped into existence. If it was, get hit by it and restart the level. If it wasn't, pair everything up, head down the ladder, then goad the Gruzzles you lured into the hole towards that ladder so that you can use the ladder to help get over them. You'll then need to grab 2 books on your way to the door and exit the level having scored 150 points. Now, 315 is kind of a mess. Scoring items everywhere, Gruzzles getting in the way in unusual spots, and this is yet another instance where I realized after the fact, when reviewing my footage, that I could have scored even lower. The thing is, I was trying too hard to goad the Gruzzles away from where I wanted them to be, but the reality is that I could have avoided collecting 3 scoring items if I instead slimed one of the Gruzzles, thus scoring 10 points from sliming the Gruzzle instead of 15 points from picking up those 3 items. Had I realized that sooner, I would have ended the level with 170 points instead of 175 from 1 book near the left side of the map and 3 books directly in the path of the exit door. 316 is also kind of a mess, but it was a little easier to figure out, though it requires more precision to do the jumps and more goading of the Gruzzles. Plus, if the third Gruzzle spawns in, you cannot get the minimum score possible, thus it's best to check to see if the third Gruzzle has spawned or not, and if it has, take a hit, reset the level, and try again. Ultimately, you can clear this level having collected only 2 extra books for a score of 150, both of which are on the edges of platforms you need to jump up to get to some of the question mark boxes. 317 isn't all that bad since you can completely avoid going into the mountains to the left, as all of the question mark boxes can be accessed without doing so, allowing you to clear the level with the bare minimum of 140 points. But then we get to level 318, the level I had asterisked for being evil. Well, it's because it's the only level in the game where the instant you enter it, you get a scoring item. The reason this is evil is because if we go to save our progress now, those 5 points from that item will get baked into our score. Now, the smart thing for me to have done at this point would have been to immediately make a copy of my player profile so that I could start again from 317 once I knew what was in store for 318. But I didn't do that. And because I didn't succeed on my first attempt at 318, I now had an extra 5 points I couldn't get rid of. So yeah, in order to ensure you get the minimum score possible on 318, you have to clear 318 immediately after clearing 317. Otherwise, you have to go back to your 317 save and do 317 over again. All that said, 318 itself is actually medium difficulty, though because the third optional Gruzzle is immediately at the start as well and is near impossible to dodge, you're also flipping a coin when this level starts as to whether you've even got a chance of attempting it at all for a minimum score. Now if you do get that chance, you're going to need to do a lot of Gruzzle goading and will ultimately need to pick up 12 books in order to finish the level. The book you're forced to get at the start, a single book under a long, low-hanging platform, 4 books on a roof directly underneath a question mark box, and then to get back from the left side of the map, you have to go into that same building from the left and collect 6 of the 8 books in that section, as one is too high to be of consequence and the last can be jumped over, meaning you'll end the level with 200 points. I ended with 205 points because again, evil book right on top of the entry door that bakes into your save data. Then we come to 319, the hardest level to get a minimum score on in the entire game. First of all, scoring items freaking everywhere, so it makes it hard to know which ones you have to get and which ones can be avoided, so there was a ton of trial and error figuring that out. Now, one fortunate thing about this level is that, because of how the placement of things work out, we're ultimately able to goad any and all Gruzzles to the waterfall and to their doom. So this level is all about extreme precision, and I really mean that. The instant you make the slightest mistake in your jumps, you will almost certainly collect an item you didn't intend to. This is particularly bad right at the start, especially when trying to transition between the waterfall area and beyond, though I ultimately found consistent jump points which helped to make this at least a little easier. Although another thing I realized late in the level is that there's a cactus you can jump onto, and once you know you can do this, you suddenly become able to dodge a bunch more scoring items than you would otherwise think possible. But none of this elevated this level to total insanity. To qualify as total insanity, there has to be some aspect of it which absolutely burns through your time. In 3.1, this was having to goad the Gruzzles down more than one flight of stairs, and in 3.10, this was due to wanting specific RNG and never getting it because it wasn't possible, and then still having to execute on at least some RNG and some precision. Here in 3.19, we once again have to rely on RNG, but for the word we have to spell. So the word we have to spell in each level is randomly selected from whatever word set we've been given, with each episode having its own word sets to work from. Now once you get a particular word set, that word set is baked into your save, meaning you can't get different words. My word set for this level was black, globe, present, puppet, leash, cork, grass. However, because words in this game can have between 2 and 7 letters, not all the letters are guaranteed to show up in a level. But the letter positions are not actually random, with each letter position based on where its position is within a word. That's why I've been referring to them as the first, second, or third letter in the word we have to spell when I've been forced to collect them. However, in order to get a minimum score in this level, we have to ensure that the 5th letter in the word we have to spell does not show up. Otherwise, we'll be forced to grab it. Which means before we can even make an attempt, the word we have to spell must be 4 letters long or less, meaning only one of the words I had at my disposal worked, cork. So I had to constantly reset the level over and over and over and over and over again until I finally got cork as the word to spell, and then I could make the attempt. In fact, when you get here, double check your word list and make sure at least one word is less than 5 letters long. Otherwise, you have to do the 317-318 pair all over again. Freaking yikes. Anyways, once all the stars finally aligned, I managed to complete 319, having collected 13 scoring items. 4 books near the ladder, which you can avoid going one way but not the other, 3 books going up to one of the rooftop question mark boxes, and 1 more book going for the other, a single book going for the box in the top right corner of the map, another book when having to avoid the other top right question mark box when it has an incorrect image, which no, there's no way to RNG manipulate your way around that one, When going to the left side of the map, to avoid the question mark box there, you need to collect both a book and the second letter in the word we have to spell. And then finally, all the way to the left, we can use the cactus to get on top of the exit door area and drop down into it, avoiding all of the books there by collecting a slime bucket. In total, we scored 205 points for this level. Then finally, level 320, the final level of the entire experience, and it's medium difficulty. And also the only instance in this entire proceeding which requires us to use a trick I haven't had to explain yet. Now, for the level itself, it's mostly just a little bit of precision with your jumps and goading the Gruzzle around, nothing too outrageous, but a little time consuming. At the very end though, to get to the exit door, we would be forced to pick up a book and score 145 points for the level. But the door is low enough that we can instead dodge the book by doing a mid-air jump and thus clear the level with only the bare minimum of 140 points. Now, I know what you're thinking. What the actual heck? You can mid-air jump in this game and you haven't been abusing this to go wherever you want? Well, here's the thing. It's not as useful as a trick as you would expect, and it will make sense why not when I explain how it works. Basically, the way the game processes jumping is by starting a 9-frame timer when you initially push the jump button. Every frame during this 9-frame timer, it checks to see if you're holding the jump button, and if you are, you rise half a tile, and if you're not, you fall half a tile as you normally would. The thing is, when you stop holding the jump button, this timer still keeps going, meaning if you let go and then start holding it again, while this 9-frame timer is active, you can once again continue rising into the air. The trouble is that this doesn't reset the timer. Basically, the moment you initiate a jump, you are allowed 9 frames of ascent, and they can be any 9 frames you want, as dictated by if you're holding the jump button or not. This can be useful to avoid certain things, but it's also very inconsistent, especially since the game occasionally misses super fast inputs. So you want to avoid using this trick under most circumstances. And while it can make it possible to get up to a higher level without touching items more than 2 tiles above that platform that you're trying to reach, you need at least 2 extra frames of jump height for that to work, meaning this doesn't work with platforms you can only just barely make it up to. However, when going for the exit door here in the final level, what we want to do is jump, immediately release the jump button, then immediately press it again. This delays our ascent just far enough to clear the book and still make it up to the door. And if we screw it up, we simply fall back down and can give it another try. This is the only spot in the entire game where the mid-air jump gives us an advantage towards achieving the lowest score possible, and thus we end the final level of episode 3 with 140 points. And had I not attained 2 extra pickups I didn't have to over the course of my run, my final score would have been a simple 3,200 points. And to actually finish this run of episode 3 at all took me 6 hours and 32 minutes. Suffice to say, I don't think I'm ever going to be playing this game again. I've gotten more than enough out of it for one video. Anyways, I'll have a link in the video description so you can download my final results for your own reference, but generally speaking, this is not a run I would recommend anyone attempt. This was beyond frustrating at times, and especially in episode 3, there were moments where I felt like I was losing my mind and that it wasn't worth the effort. In the end, though, I did get there, or rather I got as close as I cared to attempt. The auto-saving thing really burned into the desire to do this as well, as having to constantly switch back and forth from a hex editor and manage my save state appropriately was aggravating. Suffice to say, if you want to do this on real hardware, you would have to have a 100% perfect run in one shot for each episode. That would be a very fast way to lose your sanity. So that'll be all for this ADG Pro video. Stay tuned for the next proper review, episode 353, debuting on Saturday, February 14th, where we're going to be taking a look at a sequel to a game that I've already covered on the show. Except, just like Firehawk, which was the sequel to Thexter, this is yet another sequel which downgraded the original title of the game into a subtitle, taking on a whole new name in the process. So be sure to stay tuned to see what game it turns out to be and why they would have gone through that effort in the first place. Thanks for watching, and extra special thanks to every one of my supporters over on Patreon. Whether it's $1 or $10, every little bit helps, so please consider joining the ensemble over at patreon.com/KASICK.